Welcome to Into the Writer's Cave. I'm your host, Patricia Sargent. On this episode, we're going into the writer's cave with critically acclaimed mystery author and retired police detective David Swinson. Can you tell us a little bit more about The City on the Edge? Your protagonist, you mentioned, is a teenager. How did you develop the plot? What inspired you to write the story?
That actually was in my head for 20 years. I've always wanted to write, and the title had changed, and there were different versions of it that I had written. And after I wrote the trilogy, the Frank Marr trilogy, and I was given another 3-book deal with Little Brown, I talked to my editor and I said I'd really like to write this book. And I did not think that it would be considered coming of age, but he really liked the idea and the premise and the story. And I gave him some sample chapters, and he loved the voice. So it changed, and I had to add a mystery element to it, which is totally fiction, obviously a murder. But there is a lot about it that is, semi-autobiographical. I grew up there, and, I witnessed, a lot of what Graham, the protagonist, 13-year-old or 12, 13-year-old protagonist witnessed. But, yeah.
So you are happy with the story, even though you added the mystery for the publisher?
Oh yeah, no, totally happy. I would have probably added the mystery when, without the publisher. I would have added a mystery element, because I love that. I love the crime element. I love crime fiction.
How was it for you writing with a teenage protagonist? Did you have any struggle with that, or did you just channel your younger self?
Well, yeah, and I sort of channeled my younger self, but it was also reflective, so it wasn't that hard, to do.
Do you think you might use a teenage protagonist in any future stories, or?
Oh, I'd love to. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, definitely.
So young adult mysteries would be something that would appeal to you?
I don't know about the genre, but I mean, again, going back to To Kill a Mockingbird, I mean, that was like reflective, and it was a young, girl, and a brilliant book. I mean, not to say that I would love to accomplish that type of book in my life, but I love the voice.
Are there any other genres that you have considered writing in?
I love crime. Crime is everything. I mean, crime fiction, you get everything. I don't think I could write something straight, just if it did not involve crime fiction in some way.
So how about time travel crime?
No, I don't think I've never been a sci-fi guy. I can't. I recently saw, for the second time, I saw like Loopers and movies that involve science fiction, and I love it. But can I write it? No. It doesn't mean I don't like it. It just means I can't. It's not my head.
So could you tell us a little bit about A Detailed Man? Because as I mentioned to you before, that plot just sounds really tasty to
me. A Detailed Man was a book that took me, like 10 years to write, because I was working at the time. And it was my first go at first person present tense, which ended up becoming the Frank Marr series. And it was semi-autobiographical, like I said, and because I did suffer from Bell's palsy, and my 7th cranial nerve is totally dead. So I mean, half of my face is actually 98% paralyzed from it. But Ezra Simeon is always been a character I love, and he was like my first exploration into like a character in DC, in the DC Police Department, and I absolutely loved the book. I mean, it was again, I think I mentioned it was with a very small San Francisco press, and then the rights reverted back to me, so I pulled it, and I would like it to be re-released sometime as a detailed man, but edited a little more thoroughly. I think it needs a little more editing, but it's of course it's the beginning of my. You know, I wrote a book when I was 17, so it's not the beginning of my books, but because I wrote a book when I was 17 called The Apple Tree, and it was rejected when I was 18. And I swear it was by Little Brown and Company. And if I think that the rejection was so terrible in my head that I stopped writing for years. But I think that if the editor had realized I was just 17, she probably would have been more kind, you know. So I still have that book, but I want anybody to read it? No, not at all. But A Detailed Man is something I'm very proud of and I love.
Well, I'm looking forward to reading it when you re-release it. So now we're coming to the lightning round questions. I warned you about this in our email exchange, so you knew this was coming. I hope you're prepared.
Okay.
These are 5 questions that I ask just for fun and to get a little bit further into your head, you know, right in there. The first question, night owl or early bird?
No, I think we got into this and you realized by looking at my eyes, definitely night owl.
Now, are you a night owl because your career, or are you a night owl just naturally?
Started in the 80s with promoting concerts and working from 10 a.m. till 3 a.m.
Wow.
You know, but having a hard time at 10 a.m. And detective, it was very difficult having day work. I ended up, you know, being, you know, 3 to 11, which was my perfect time.
Oh.
You know, and then as a writer, I am most productive, you know, afternoon, you know, like after 12.
Oh,
You know,
really?
through the evening. Yeah, not in the morning. No.
Well, so what do you do to get yourself into that writing mindset?
Something I learned from actually, you know, Jeffrey Deaver and, you know, James Grady and some incredible freaking authors who are friends of mine, is you just sit down at a designated time every day and just you stare at that laptop. And if something comes, it comes. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But you have that designated time where you do it, and it'll happen.
That's a brilliant
And
idea.
yeah, even if it's a sentence, and you sit there for 4 hours, you get a sentence, you're proud of it. You know, if nothing happens, at least you sat there and you thought about it. You know? So it's just like that. I think that is the most important thing for aspiring writers is that you have to have a routine and you have to stick to it. You know, I mean, it's understandable if you work. I mean, if you work full time, you know, find that time, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, find that time and just stick to it all the time.
You know, that is excellent advice. I've also heard that if writing is something that you want to do, and let's face it, with a full-time job, with a family, with personal things that you need to take care of, it's hard to find the time. So sometimes you just have to make the time. Like I've heard some parents who are also authors, they'll write while they're waiting in the car for their kid to come out of school or something. So yeah, as you said, you have to make it a habit. Okay,
Yeah.
next lightning round question. Coffee or tea?
Coffee, without a doubt. always. I grew up again in Beirut, and at the age of 13 and 12, I would be spitting the grinds out of my teeth, between they get stuck in my teeth because my dad would, I'd be allowed to drink Turkish coffee or whatever. And so I grew up with coffee. I can have coffee at 11 p.m. at night and still go to sleep. It's like it's like relaxing to me.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. Okay. Quiet night in or evening out with friends?
Actually, it's a 50-50. It's both. I mean, I love spending a night in and binging, like on like Netflix series or something on Amazon or um, just having my time, but I love more than anything, I love going to restaurants in DC with friends and, just going to some new restaurants or restaurants I keep going to and having a couple of drinks and spending time with friends.
Oh,
So
that's
that's yeah, both.
okay. So you gave us a little bit of your writing schedule, your writing ritual. Take us into your writing world. Do you have music, snacks?
Music is huge.
Oh,
I do playlists for every book.
oh, fabulous.
But I don't listen to music while I'm writing, but I listen to it before and after.
Wow.
And every book has a playlist. My new book has a beginning playlist that has 7 songs on it so far, but usually the playlists, you know, have like end up with 10, 12 songs. In fact, if people go to like Little Brown, Mulholland, um, and search David Swinson, I think there's a couple of Spotify playlists, not only from me, but from Chris Holm, who's a friend of mine, another great writer who has a book coming out called Child Zero on Little Brown Mulholland. He does playlists too. So they've actually published our playlists on Spotify.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah, huge. That's music is like very, very important, yeah, to me. I will listen to one song 100 times if it inspires me.
Wow. So for Frank Marr, can you give us a couple of songs from your Frank Marr, the title of a couple of songs from your Frank Marr playlist?
Definitely Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. Uh, and John Cale, Fear is the Man's Best Friend. John Cale was in the Velvet Underground, and I actually booked him in the 80s, solo. Um, I mean, even like, it's really funny. The Los Angeles Times invited me to the Los Angeles Times book convention in LA. And I was on a panel with one of the reporters and this other author, and then Joe Ide, who you should interview. He's great. He does the IQ series. And this one guy, I mean, on my playlist, we were talking before the panel started, because on my playlist for Frank Marr was a song I'm not embarrassed, I mean, to say it was Bread, you know, just very mushy, a Bread song. And he happened to know the lead singer, and he called the lead singer, when we were on the panel, and told him, hey, you're in this book, because and like the second in Crime Song, he had a album by Bread that belonged to his mother, and all the vinyl was stolen, and he was most concerned about that album by Bread because it belonged to his deceased mother.
Oh.
So Bread was in it, and a lot of the Pixies, and a lot of very alternative, stuff like that. And interestingly enough, my editor Josh Kendall also would do playlists after he read the book, and he'd send me the CDs, and it was interesting how the artists were very different, but the tone and everything I would imagine about, for the book, it was dead on, was brilliant.
Wow,
Like
that's neat.
Della Soul, he had Della Soul on one, and I mean, so it was great.
Oh, that's neat.
Yeah, for City on the Edge, it was very old school. It was Jethro Tull, America, um, um, Funkadelics. Do you remember the Funkadelics?
Yes.
Yes, Maggot Brain by the Funkadelics. I mean, I kept listening to Maggot Brain over and over and over again. Writing that because that's what I actually grew up listening to was Grand Funk Railroad, the Funkadelics, and on the total reverse side, like America and Jethro Tull, and in Velvet Underground, stuff like that.
Wow. That's very neat. Okay, so when you're not writing, what do you most like to do?
um, Eat and watch TV, and
We have a lot in
I'm
common.
really getting into this new book by Tom Lynn. I love to read. I love to hang out and go places with friends and walk.
Super. Well, before we let you return to your stories, is there anything in particular you might want to say to our viewer readers?
Readers and writers, or readers?
This this show is primarily for readers, but you
Mhm.
could make a comment to writers as well.
Well, readers, support your library. A lot of thing that people don't know is that the libraries support the authors. They pay full price for the books from the publisher. So authors actually make money from they don't keep buying and buying. They buy one copy, but I mean, libraries need the support, and actually that also supports the authors. By them, if the book's not in the library, them recommending it, or if it is in the library, if they keep checking it out, that's important because then they'll buy the next author's book, and stuff like that. And it also just supports the library. And most importantly, I think is just support your brick and mortar stores, your little bookstores, and keep reading, and explore genres. I mean, there's so many great authors out there that are yet to be experienced. Independent, self-published, traditional. That are there's so much out there to read.
Truly. Do you have a library anecdote to share with us?
A library. I That's odd that you mentioned because that was not something we talked about. But oddly enough, it was like a Maryland library. Um, I was with another mystery writer, and this was not something you and I talked about. So it's weird you asked this question because this is a very weird thing that happened. I had been introduced as a former detective, and there was this lady who was like listening intently, to the whole thing. At the end, when it came to the Q&A, she goes, I've gotten 2 parking tickets, you know, from, the police, and I don't think I deserved those parking tickets, and I've contested them, and they still, I still had to pay for the parking tickets, what, and I'm going, oh my God, I don't know how to answer that, I mean, so it was like, had nothing to do with writing. It was like about me as a detective, maybe being able to help her out. There's unfortunately nothing I can do to help someone out. It's, especially in Maryland. So yeah, no, that was the only thing. But my library experiences have been wonderful. I love, the speaking engagements I have there because the librarians are just, I mean, the conversations are like this. They're very into the books. They're just, you know, all about books. They live books.
I love librarians and I love libraries. And
Mhm.
I blame that. I put the reason for that on my sister. We used to go to the library when we were kids growing up in Brooklyn, we'd go to the library every weekend because the library was walking distance, fortunately, from our house.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that's where I first learned to love the
Yeah, me
library.
too. Libraries, definitely in DC for
Yeah.
me.
Well, David, thank you so very, very much for inviting us into your story world. Before I release you, how can readers find out even more about your books, your and your stories and keep up with you? Are you on social media, on the internet?
Yeah, I'm on. You can find me at Case Jackets on Twitter. David Swinson on Facebook, both author page and personal page, and then I'm also on Instagram as David Swinson. I don't maintain a website anymore. I just don't think that's important. Because I have Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I think that's enough.
Super. So when you have books coming up, you post those announcements on those social media
Yeah,
pages?
and so does my publisher, and yeah, and
Fantastic. And
it comes out in a lot of the trades, Publishers Weekly, Kirkus, Library Journals, a real big supporter, Book List, a lot of the trade magazines.
super. Thank you so very much for spending time with us,
Thank
David.
you. It was great.
Oh, this was a lot of fun. And viewer readers, thank you so much for watching our interviews with David Swinson. I'm Patricia Sargent. You can find out about my books at patriciasargent.com. Please remember to hit like, subscribe, and post a comment to this video. Until next time, happy reading.